Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to create a model using InLab. So what we did is we went ahead and we imported our model as a DXD into InLab. And you can see when it does that, it's going to have our marked margin. Okay, if there's any area that I don't like, that I couldn't see on my computer screen or couldn't modify, we can go ahead and we can make that little adjustment right there. So overall, we've got a really nice marked margin, which has been verified on our radiograph, and we have a really nice fit of our provisional restoration. Looking at our margin all the way around, we got a really nice capture utilizing a two-chord technique, and we're able to draw our margin on a color model very, very easily. So now what we're going to do is we want to send this off, let's say, to the Army Dental Lab to have them actually work on the color, contour, consistency of this restoration. So we're going to go ahead and under the administrative screen, make sure that we have models selected for the upper jaw and lower jaw. We also want to make sure that our crown is still highlighted because that's going to preserve our margin when we go forward to our draw model screen. So we're going to go to start our InLab function, and you can see in real time, I'm not going to pause or cut this video, how long this process actually takes. It's a fairly quick process if you have access to Dentsply Sirona InLab software. If you don't have access to it, I'll show you how to do this in Meshmixer as well.
Okay, so now you can see that everything has imported from our InLab software. And what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and clean our models. So cleaning our models is a simple task. We're going to double left click on this line that shows up, single left click to save our progress, left click and drag to move our model, right click and drag to bring our model to the part of the screen, and remove any of this excess tissue that we don't need for 3D printing purposes, which is just going to ultimately get in our way. So we'll come down to our lower model, and we're going to trim all this excess tissue out the way, and double click here. Next thing we're going to do is come over to the lingual side, get rid of some of the floor of the mouth. All these areas are just going to create print problems for us and result in more lab work for the dental lab. Okay? So then I'm going to go ahead and I usually add about 3 to 4 millimeters to our models and click apply. The reason I do that is I like to print my models flat, and I like everything very easy to work with when it comes to our 3D printing process. So I can print this flat on a printer bed and reduce the post cleanup that I have to do by removing supports. Next thing we're going to do is go to create stump. Okay, we don't want to create a die, we just want to create a ditch. We're going to be somewhere between 0.5 and 1 millimeter for a ditch. I usually will try to do somewhere between 0.5 and 0.7 to make the life of the laboratory pretty easy. Now you can see our nice marked margin that we have imported from our software here. If we click apply, sometimes our margin doesn't cut the way we want, or doesn't ditch the way we want. It's okay, not a huge deal. All we're going to do is turn our margins off. And I'm going to go into the software, turn my lower jaw off, and I'm going to go around. The software tried to ditch my margins, but it didn't like something about my mesh framework. So what I'm going to do is double left click to start. I'm going to go around, and because I'm still in the Dentsply Sirona architecture of the software, I can go around really easily. You can see I don't lose a lot of edge data on my non-color model. And I'm going to go ahead and just redraw my margin really quick. It's super easy to draw in this step, especially if you have a really nice scan. We've got really easy times marking our margins. So I'm going to come back around here. We're going to go in here, maybe fix this one little spot right here. This is something I'd absolutely not expect my lab to do for me. I definitely want to do this part myself, just because I think it's a lot easier for me to make this determination of what my margin actually is as compared to the dental lab. I want the lab to have 0 questions on where my dental margin is at. So overall, now that we've remarked that margin because it didn't ditch the way we wanted it to last time, we go in here one more time. Let me bring this down just ever so slightly. There we go. And bring this down ever so slightly here. There we go. We're going to go ahead and reditch my die. We'll click apply, and now you're going to see we're going to have a really nice solid ditch all the way around. So now we shouldn't have any issues in the laboratory reading that margin. It should make for a very, very easy restoration to design in any 3D printing software or any 3D design software, and it should make for an easy model to print in any 3D printing software. We're then going to go to our final screen. And the last step, which is super important, is we're going to create two STL exports. First, we're going to click on Single File Export, which will export the upper and lower jaw together. We'll click Export, and we'll save it as ditched. We'll click Save. So now we're going to have a Sargent E ditched single file. And then now we're going to unclick this box and click Export. Number 8. So now what we're going to have is an upper and a lower jaw that are separate. Now at this point we could send this off to the Army Dental Lab, and we could send them the upper jaw, the lower jaw, and that single export file that we sent, which was our buccal bite image, which is going to be these two models together. When we unclick this single export file, it'll export the lower jaw by itself, then the upper jaw by itself, and then they can put those models together. I'm going to show you the next step, which I take one step further and actually put these models back together for them and remove the base to make their job in model fabrication even easier.
Add a new order, and we'll call this ADL number 8, and we'll save and add a case. So now we'll go ahead and click on tooth number 8, and we'll put what we want it to be. It really doesn't matter because we're just going to export this as an STL file. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. And perfect. Okay. So the nice thing about InLab 20 is even though I don't have a scanner, I can go ahead and import an STL model. So we want to delete the die rotation because we don't need that for this function. We're just going to use the upper jaw, the lower jaw, and the occlusion. So we're going to start by importing our STL, which we saved to the desktop as Sargent E ditched active jaw. It's going to tell me that the jaws are a closed-based model, which can lead to instability. Would you like to adjust the case and open the model? Yes. You always want to send an open STL file to your laboratory because it's going to make it a lot easier for them to work with. Now you can see when this transfers over to an STL how crisp and how easily readable even the deepest margin is going to be. So there's our upper jaw, there's our open STL file. We're going to click on lower jaw, import STL file, Sargent E counter. It's going to ask me the same question. We click yes. Now we're going to go to occlusion, and this is where our bite from earlier came in, Sargent E bite. This is going to be the single file export that we had. Again, we're going to click yes to open up our model. And now, when we send this off to the Army Dental Lab, here's what we have. We have a really nice ditched model, which is going to be very easy for the dental lab to read our margins. It's going to be the exact same or very, very similar to the margins that I marked for my provisional restoration. We're then going to go ahead and click export. We'll save this to the desktop as a highest resolution STL file. And we'll put Sargent E final ADL and click save. So we have our two models right here that fit together fairly nicely out of our Serac PrimeScan. So we're going to do all the same model functions that we did in InLab, but we're just going to now do them in MeshMixer. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my upper jaw by clicking on my object browser and clicking on a little eyeball. We're going to then trim our lower model by using the select function, using the lasso, single left clicking. Now in this software we have to create a closed line to be able to tell the computer where we want to trim. We'll click edit and we'll click discard. Okay, so that looks good here. We'll go back into select, we'll go into the lasso function, and we will discard. Okay, same thing here on the lingual. We'll select, lasso, single left click. Here we go, and we'll discard. Okay, so for now, everything on the mandible has been trimmed. We can go ahead and we can click Control A. We can go to Modify and we can smooth our boundary. It's going to select our boundary right here, and we will click smoothness. You can go all the way up, and we'll click Accept. So now we have a much smoother boundary with a lot less jagged triangles. Okay, now that our model has a smooth boundary, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to Extrude. Everything's already selected, which is that Control A function. We're going to offset our model. Okay. Now, what you can also do is you can come up here and I'll say -30, and we'll click Enter. I want this model to be really far extruded. Okay, and that becomes really important here in a second as to why we extrude it so far. We'll go ahead and we'll click Accept. It's going to take a second depending on how fast your computer software is, or your computer hardware is. Usually the more RAM your computer has, the quicker this function goes. Okay, well next we'll use our plane cut function. We left click, hold, and we drag. Okay, and if we accidentally cut the model that we wanted, we do the other way. We left click, hold, and drag from the opposite direction. And that'll flip our plane cut 180 degrees. Now when we flip the model over, you can see we have this really nice smooth base. We'll go ahead and we'll click Accept. We now have a really nice smooth based model, which we could print in any printer on the market. Okay, so we're all done with that model. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come up to our upper jaw, and we're going to do the very same thing. We're going to click Select, Lasso, cut out any extraneous tissue that we don't need. We'll discard that. That looks really good. Okay, so now we'll click Control A. We'll go to Modify. We'll smooth our boundary. And if you look here, this is the area we're trying to smooth. You can see the two different lines. Every vertex, every line that the computer has to try to calculate together when you're extruding a model leads to increased computational time. So if we smooth our boundary out and we click Accept, we now have a really nice smooth boundary that's going to make our extrusion function much easier. This boundary smooth is going to come in handy later on as well. So we'll go ahead and we're going to go ahead and we are going to edit and we're going to extrude this model. And again, we'll do -30. And when it talks about smoothing your boundary, what it's actually doing is it's taking your boundary, which are a series of triangles, and it's making the triangles smaller in that area, and it's making the line smoother. It's making that area more simple, so that way we can have a smoother, more optimized boundary. So now we'll go ahead and we'll use our plane cut function. We'll come over here. And now, if you want to rotate it ever so slightly, we can rotate it. I don't really enjoy this function because I feel like it lags. So generally speaking, if I don't like my plane cut, I'll just go back and I'll do it again. So we'll go ahead and do our plane cut one more time. Click accept. Now we have a really nice based model. So we're going to next come over here. We'll hit Control A. We're going to modify and we're going to clear any face group that we have on the model. We want the model to look completely gray. All right. We're then going to use our select function and we're going to go in and we're going to brush our margins. We're going to use the size tool of about 30. We're going to come all the way around the margins like so. Okay. We're going to try to stay off our adjacent teeth if we can. We're going to go ahead and create our little land area where we want the computer to make a nice smooth ditched margin for us by holding the control button. Overall, I'm pretty happy with that. I try to keep just my margins smooth. I don't try to get on my prep too much. Just smoother optimize my boundary. This is going to allow me to make a really nice optimized smooth and trim margin. So there we go. So we're going to come over here, modify. We're going to go ahead and we are going to optimize our boundary or smooth our boundary. We're going to come over here. We're going to click accept. All right. And now if we clear selection, you'll see we have this different color right here. Okay. That's important. This is going to become the area that is going to be trimmed in a minute. So we're going to come back here and we're going to brush this. So now we're going to come around and we're going to draw our margin and try to be kind of as exacting as we can. We'll go back and really make this a lot more smooth here in a second. So we'll come over here and we're going to select our entire prepped tooth. Come over here. Come over here. We're not going to smooth our boundary again. We're just going to select this and we're going to create this to a separate grouping which is separate from the area that we're going to transform in a second. So overall here is my prepped tooth. We're going to make our tool a little bit smaller. We're going to hit the control button. We'll remove any area that we don't think is our margin. So right here, this is our margin in this area. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and hit the control button down here. Part of this tooth that's not our margin, we'll get rid of. So we'll come through here. We'll really zoom in on this corner. We'll come through like this. Now, there we go. So now there's our tooth. We'll go ahead. We'll optimize that boundary. We'll create our face group. All right, so now you can see we've got two different groupings. So now what I want to do is I want to double click here to select this. We're going to go ahead and hit Control and areas that we want to remove. And now we're just going to go ahead and deform. We're going to transform. And now what you'll see is we'll take this little function right here and we can move our ditch around our margin. Now I'm going to cancel what I just did there. We're going to clear our selection and I'm going to show you why it looks so odd. So we're going to double click on this again. When we do our transform, we want to make sure we have the world view, which is W. what that's going to do is that's going to, whatever direction we pull on this, cause that margin to be ditched down and ditched away from where we're working. So now we click accept. You can see here that we've got a really, really smooth area. We can hit edit, conform, we can do smooth. We can hit accept. Now we can sculpt just this face grouping by hitting this smooth function. We could change that if we want to, but that's an unnecessary step. We don't have to do that. Overall, we're going to leave that alone. Now, we've got a nice ditched margin. We can hit File, we can hit Export, and now we have a new upper that has been ditched. That's a lot easier for the Army Dental Lab to recognize. And we'll hit Control A. We'll clear all of our face groupings. So now we have our gray model, which you can see has a really nice ditched line all the way around it, which should make life a lot easier for the laboratory technician that's trying to draw our margin around that crown. Again, I don't think it looks quite as pretty as doing this in the InLab software, but it's a free way that you can do that and ensure that your margins that you drew remain sacred and everything remains intact. So overall, hope you enjoyed the two different ways that we can do this. I'll also include a video from Baron Gruder, which is a video that is just on YouTube, which you can view, which used a little bit different approach to how to ditch a margin, but overall, both very easy ways to do it, and you can see makes a lot more readable marginal line for us. That's it.